Well, good morning everyone. We might kick off. Thank you so much for showing up, and early no less. I hope you've had the opportunity for a bit of a chat. Just a few little quick housekeeping items before we get started. Obviously the bathrooms you passed on your way in. If there's an evacuation, please follow this team. Actually no, we all know where we're going. We're familiar with the Albert Hall. Please follow any directions during that period. We'll be running through and welcoming our CEO in just a second to speak briefly. We'll also be having an update from myself and a couple of the team members from our strategic land use planning team. I'd like to acknowledge the Tasmanian Aboriginal people as traditional custodians of this land. We pay respect to elders past and present as they hold the memories, traditions, culture and hope for generation to come. We recognise and value Aboriginal histories, knowledge and lived experiences and commit to being culturally inclusive and respectful in our working relationships with Aboriginal people. We will be making use of a tool called Slido today. This is a way for you to participate in our industry pulse check at the end of the session. It's also a way for you to ask questions during the Q&A session. So I encourage you all to pull your phone out. While you have it out, put it on silent or mute, and also just point it up here for the QR code. If that doesn't work for you, you can go to slido.com and enter the code on screen. When we get to the Q&A and industry pulse check, I'll show the QR code again so you can participate. I'd love for you to tell me when you ask questions who you are, but if you don't want to do that and you're shy, you can be anonymous. Without further ado, I'll welcome Sam Johnson, our CEO, to say a few words.
Thank you, Chelsea, and good morning and welcome everyone. It's beautiful to see a nice full room here in the beautiful new Albert Hall building as well. Before I kick off, can I just get a quick show of hands? Anyone here from the state government? I've got to be really careful. Okay, righto. Thank you. Welcome. I've got to pivot a little bit what I was going to say then. No, just joking. I do want to acknowledge actually on behalf of the state government, the Honourable Kerry Vincent, the Minister responsible for housing and planning and growth and about 40 other different things in the state government as well. And I think that's important because he couldn't be here today, but I do want to acknowledge the work that our team have had with the state government and DSG, and particularly with Kerry Vincent's growth and aspirations in his style. So I'm finding working with him and his team and his departments quite pleasingly in terms of where we're trying to go as a city for the City of Launceston and Northern Tasmania. So why are we here? We're here because we as a City of Launceston are in growth mode, unashamedly. About 18 months ago, Council made a direct appointment to appoint myself with a very clear intention and ambition. We want a strategy, we want a vision, we want growth, and more importantly, we want results. We went through a 12-month process around working out what that vision actually is. We sat in a room and we whiteboarded till the cows come home. What exactly is it we're trying to achieve? What do you want to do? You keep telling me you're upset with West Tamar. You keep telling me you're upset with Meander Valley, all great councils, all good friends and good colleagues of ours, and we need them to be successful like us. But reality is we were jealous. We were jealous of those around us because they got on with it. They got on with growth. They got on with investment. West Tamar's shooting the lights out. Devonport shooting the lights out. Good on them. We've been asleep at the wheel. We acknowledge that. We respect that. However, that's changed and it will be changing. We went through our strategic planning process and we do have an endorsed strategic plan which has some really bold statements in it, some really bold statements and some really, really big stretch targets. We're not shying away from that. We're going to stand by them. We're going to stand by them for the next 10 years. For example, we have publicly said we are going to grow our population by 40%. 40% in 10 years. We want to take our population from a direct 71,000 residents to 100,000 residents, being the fastest growing regional city in this country. It's bold and it's ambitious, but you've got to have a vision and you've got to believe in it to be able to succeed. With that comes 4,300 new homes at a minimum. All sounds great on paper, we recognise that. So then, what are we doing about that as an organisation? And I want to give two very simple examples to demonstrate that words are one thing, actions are another. One, you're here today. And you're here today because we have an executive team that's committed and we have a senior leadership team that's actually committed to be behind that vision and actually grow the City of Launceston and believe in it, invest in it from a resourcing perspective. Secondly to that, we've actually made internal resourcing decisions around exactly this. The two people you see here are the start of a new division in our organisation called Strategic Planning. Didn't exist. We used to sit there and say Launceston's going to grow, we're going to do development, we're going to work with developers, and I can see some of those big developers in this room. Right, but those developers were working with our planning team who are exceptionally experienced and well-meaning people, but not strategic planning. People whose sole job is purely to look at how do we deliver 4,300 new homes? How do we make sure 30,000 people have a house to live in? How do we make sure strategic infrastructure is built? Which then feeds into our finance assets team, which has also been built, and around our capital program. What we're about to present to our elected council is an updated long-term financial plan, which I suspect is probably going to scare most of the room, because we're actually now building in all the infrastructure costs. Rather than actually trying to pull numbers out to make the numbers look good and feel good, we're actually saying it's okay to invest. It's okay to take the large sum of money we have in the bank and invest it in infrastructure. It's okay to go to the Tasmanian Lending Corp and borrow money and invest, just like Hobart did. Everyone talks, Devonport. Our councillors talk about Devonport, and I think they've done an amazing job, just quietly. They've also got $60 million worth of debt because they chose to invest in infrastructure and grow their city equally. Now, I'm not suggesting that Launceston's going to do that tomorrow, but we will be having those conversations as an elected council around what that looks like. Our long-term financial plan has got some infrastructure spend in there over the next 10 years, which well and truly exceeds $200 million. That's buildings, it's bridges, it's roads, it's footpaths, and it's supporting new subdivisions. We know there's key areas of the City of Launceston that we have to work with to grow, like St Leonard's, and the team will certainly talk you through the St Leonard's growth plan today as well, and you'll get an insight as to exactly what it is we're planning to do and some of the numbers that we need to spend. Now, I'm not trying to sell a sales pitch to you all here, because I appreciate there's also some real estate agents in the room who will be getting a bit excited around selling that, and that's good, but this is reality. This is where we're at. Council has been consistently clear in the 18 months that I've been here. Our executive team is consistently clear, and we talk about this every Monday afternoon. We talk about strategy, we talk about direction, we talk about outcomes, and we're going to continue to talk about it. And that's going to cascade down into our senior leadership team equally. And we believe in the vision. We believe in where we're going. With that, it's not going to be a simple, we have a vision, we're going to spend some money, and it's going to come off. It's going to be rocky. It's going to be bumpy. Unashamedly, we are going to challenge the norm. We're going to test ourselves, and we're going to test probably people in this room. We're going to test the state government. We're going to test the federal government. And we already are testing the federal government through some of the relationships we've established with people like Catherine King, and making sure we have that direct communication around investment. She's very clear on where we're going. I met with her here in Launceston last week. She knows exactly what we're doing. She rattled my numbers back to me before I could get them out of my mouth. She's across it. She knows what we want to spend at the airport. She knows that we want to do South Prospect. She knows that we want to do St Leonard's. She knows we want 4,300 new homes. And then she equally looks me in the eye and she says, where's your plans? Where's your funding model? Give me the detail. If you want my checkbook, give me the detail. And that's why this team is so critically important in the work that they're doing. Albeit, it takes time, and Chelsea will say this to me more often than not, be patient, Sam, calm your farm, like just let the team do it and do it properly, and we'll do it right the first time. I think it's important I set the scene around that bold ambition. And I also equally want you as key stakeholders, because each of you will be a key stakeholder to us, to hold us account. Us, me, Chelsea, the team, our elected officials. Because we want to deliver on this, and we all need to be on the same page, and we all got to be holding each other accountable. I need to hold you as stakeholders accountable, be it state government, federal government, developers, whoever, and I need you to also equally say, hey, you guys said you were going to deliver this, where are you at? Right? And that's a fair conversation for us all to have. That does mean in doing this, there's going to be some new things tested in the market. Already we're working with a developer out of Queensland, conceptual stage only, who's realised that, hang on, Launceston's actually about to do something here. They've dropped their investments in Hobart, come and met with me and gone, all right, if you're serious about the things you say you're going to do, we're prepared to do an apartment development in your CBD on one of your assets that we own. But if it's anything less than $100 million, we're out. We're talking some serious numbers and some serious developers here that have actually gone, something's happening in northern Tasmania, and we want to be a part of that. Now, that's a good story to tell, but there's a lot of pressure on us now to make sure that we keep that momentum moving and we actually deliver, because I can assure you it's good for a developer to spot an opportunity like that, but they come and go equally as quick as they come in the front door. So it's a good time, we think. We're naturally biased, clearly, and we're also probably paid to be a little bit biased. But we do think it's a great time to be in Launceston. I'm very excited around what my team is doing, led by Chelsea, in terms of housing and planning. I appreciate for some of you this is going to be a different look and a different feel, and it's going to be testing processes, and maybe things are going to be done a little bit differently to how they were previously, and that's deliberate. Because to achieve what we need to achieve and get the outcomes that we say we're going to get, we have to do things a little bit differently. So thank you for coming along today. Please engage, please ask questions. If you leave this session and you're still a bit unsure and you want to ask questions, I can assure you our team would be more than happy to reach out and have one-on-ones with you and give you any information we possibly can. We're not sitting here trying to hold back information or plans. We'll share what we can and however we can. But thank you for coming along today and participating, and please lean into the conversation and ask any question you like, and any hard technical questions. There's plenty of experts here in the room that can answer them for you. So thank you for coming along today.
Thank you, Sam. I will be brief. There's people who are going to talk about things that you probably want to hear more about than I have to say, but I would like to touch on a few things just quickly. Bureaucracies are often accused of being slow, and while we're certainly not perfect, I'd like to think that we're proving we're outliers in our sector. I stood in front of you, not in this room, in reception room. I did the math 428 days ago exactly, and we've been pushing ahead with key projects. It's probably been a bit longer than I would have liked. I'd like to see you more than, once in every 12 months, but here we are. We had our developers forum on the 17th of September last year. Since then, in January, we've had a bit of internal restructure. We've actually brought together planning and infrastructure. I have a few other things that I also do, but I think that's really important for you to understand. We used to internally within our work groups have planning over here and infrastructure over here, and now they're together and under my leadership. So I think that shows our intentions as a council that we do want to align our investment in our infrastructure projects with our planning. We also endorsed a housing plan in May 2025. I think I spoke to you about that at the last forum, and I provided a bit of that context around why we needed a housing plan and how we thought that could come together with some themes. I think that shows we move pretty quick. I first presented that to council, I believe, in July 2024, and less than 12 months later they endorsed a housing plan. So we're not sitting on our laurels. We're a little bit around the wrong way, but we quickly brought out our corporate strategic plan, which is closely linked to the ambitions in our housing plan, and that was endorsed in June 2025. Around the same time, we actually got back in the game from a strategic land use planning perspective, and we welcomed a new team in the strategic land use planning team led by Claire, and Finton's a member as well, and they'll both speak today. And we're about to welcome, fingers crossed, another 2 strategic planners. So in the last kind of year, we've gone from 0 and hopefully 4 very soon. That's something that we haven't had probably in 5 years. When we went through a restructure in 2019, that function was moved elsewhere, and then we lost that skill in-house. So I'm very excited that we have some great professionals now to lead a number of projects that we've earmarked in the housing plan. We've also been working closely with the industry through the Property Council, and I'm glad to see established a Northern Urban Renewal Committee. In August this year we had our first meeting. So I think that's a positive step and certainly shows that council is willing to engage with the industry and receive feedback that's live and frank about how we're doing in this space. I was also super proud when we had the neighbourhood plan for St Leonards and Waverley endorsed in October. I feel like that was a really monumentous day, and at the same time we also adopted an infrastructure funding framework. So we'll be officially launching our corporate strategic plan on the 1st of December, and it has 3 pillars: prosperity, place and people. Obviously the housing component sits under place. It has some bold ambitions, which Sam mentioned, one of which is to aim for 100,000 residents. And to make that happen, we need over 4,000 new homes in priority development and infill areas over the next decade. We also need to enable medium density houses around activity centres and transport corridors. I think missing middle is something that's always been talked about, but no one's ever cracked the nut of how we actually deliver that sensitively, where we have the community on board. And we also look to address affordability, homelessness and housing insecurity in our municipality. In my role, I also have responsibility for the delivery of some major projects, not all of these, but certainly the first 3. So you're in the Albert Hall. That's been a journey of love, but we're finally here and it's open again for everyone to enjoy. I think the anticipation around that's been understandable, but it's a major investment on behalf of our city, and I certainly think it makes us, more prominent as a regional city capable of hosting a range of events. The Princess Theatre is on the books and we're due to commence early next year. And we also have a really big multi-million-dollar investment planned over the next 5 years in City Heart. That includes a range of projects, but 2 under my leadership are converting us to 2-way streets. I think that's something that's been talked about for a decade in Launceston, and frankly I'm sick of hearing about it, and I've been here 2 years. So I think we just need to crack on. and get it done, and also the bus interchange. So we've had a couple of false starts in that space, but it's something we need to resolve because St John Street needs to be reconstructed. And we also have Birchall's, which was announced back last month, October, and that's exciting as well and shows a commitment to do big and bold things for our city. That's it from me. I will pass over to Richard to provide some local context about our development landscape. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Chelsea. If anyone was here last year, would remember I went through a whole series of stats. So I'm going to just refresh what we're doing and give a little bit of an update on where we're at a city, as a city. This is following on from Sam's speech about the corporate strategic plan. We're a city planning for the future. Now, 100,000 is a little bit beyond the timeline on this graph, but you can see the trajectory. I think what's interesting about this graph, though, is that our historical rate of growth will get us there. It's not an overly ambitious target. If you see the graph, there's some lumps and bumps in the graph, but ultimately 100,000 will come. We've just got to be ready for it. So I think part of our challenge going forward, and Fintan will outline this in his speech, is that it'll come around quicker than we think. We're certainly planning on our planning horizon, which is probably 15, 30 years in 2 planning periods. We're realistically looking at this 81,000 target. There's an awful lot of work from a planning perspective in infrastructure and planning and growth areas, and not least of all the regulation that goes into that, all the commission, all the amendments. So we've got a plan to try and make this a reality. But unfortunately right now, that's in the future. As Sam was saying, and hopefully this is the last time I have to say this, is that right now our share of growth and our growth trend is not where we'd like it to be. This is the burning platform really, or this is the driver for why we need to change. Launceston City Council, and anyone who knows me knows I've been around for a while. Back in probably 15 years ago, Launceston had a really strong infill agenda. We looked at all the land within the urban footprint. We did a lot of planning around that. A lot of those developed. A lot of people in this room have developed land within the urban footprint. But what we didn't get right was going, well, what's next? Once we've done that densification and once we've used up those infill sites, where do we go next? And the inability for the council to move into growth mode has slowed us down. It's taken us a long time to realise that, and I suppose what today's presentation is about is the recognition that council needs to change what it's doing if we're going to meet the needs of the community. Chelsea mentioned getting back in the game. We actually got out-competed, and it's a fair thing that Sam said, is that we were looking over the fence at other areas that were growing and realising why we weren't growing. But I suppose the challenge has been set, and I suppose that's what leads us down the path we're in today. At next year's Housing Forum, I don't want to be telling this story. I want to be telling the seeds of the new planning framework. And I'll get to some slides later where you can actually see the first shoots of that actually occurring now. We're announcing these things now, but we have people in this room that are actively developing in places like St Leonard's, and that is showing up in the stats. So I'll move it. This is declining numbers of permits overall. This is still the trend we're on. This isn't all houses, but the majority of the work we do is residential. Now, it's not all a bad news story, because obviously under state planning and things like that, there's more no permit required pathways. We're not taking as many permits as we used to. But I think in reality, we need to see those graphs going north if we're to achieve our targets. values of development is improving or is increasing. Now, I don't know whether that's a good news story. That's probably driven by costs of development and costs of building, so it's a two-edged sword. But it's good to see that the trend overall and the scale of the projects is growing in Launceston. Launceston certainly benefited from quite a lot of investment in the university and the hospital over the last few years, and this is supporting that growth. But I think those things are things that build our city, and so hopefully once those things are developed, the bigger hotels, that confidence will hopefully flow through to other investment and ultimately residential approvals. This is a snapshot of where we're going with dwellings and lots created. So you can see the overall decline in the number of dwellings approved over time, although we're seeing some rebound this year. The lots created is also a mixed bag. I think the important thing here is where the black line is above the red line, that's shrinking supply. And when the black line is above the red line, that's an increasing number of lots on the market. So it's pleasing to see in the last year the black line increasing, so we're getting more lots on the ground than we are having houses taking them up, and that's been the first time for some time. But I think if we need to grow, we need to get both those lines consistently rising to a much higher level than they are now. You know, we talk potentially of 400 lots a year, and Finton or 400 houses a year. Finton will outline that, but you can see we're not at that level, and we haven't been at that level for quite some time. So we really need to get things moving. This is interesting in the sense that it's fairly intuitive in that Youngtown and the Raglan Street area and the remains of the Mount Pleasant area have been our mainstay of development over the last few years. You know, without the subdivisions down there in Youngtown, the picture would have been significantly different for the council. The older suburbs, South Launceston, Kings Meadows, West Launceston, Summerhill, that's basically just infill development. The majority of that would be unit development. There are some smaller subdivisions. But I think what's clear from that graph is that it's the growth areas that are going to drive the change. We're not going to achieve what we can by looking towards the older suburbs and infill. If we're going to achieve our targets, we need the growth areas. So Youngtown has been our growth area. But with the end of the subdivisions out there, or them closing, those finishing up, where do we go next? This is showing us around 200 lots, 200 houses, between 175 and 240 or something of that nature. So this is showing the gap between where we want to go. We need to put at least probably double the size of those columns over the next 5 years if we're going to get where we're going. It is pleasing to see multiple dwellings growing as a share, and that may be because of cost pressures or housing affordability issues, market demands, demographic factors, but I don't see that slowing down. And as a key plank of our housing plan, we'll be targeting housing diversity even more over the coming years. I think this is where you're going to see the first signs of our new agenda, particularly St Leonard's. So if you say Youngtown and St Leonard's is clearly the fastest subdividing suburb in Launceston. It's interesting to see Waverley there because some of the growth area is in Waverley. And we're confident that over the next few years we'll approve a significant number of lots in these areas and the housing will follow. The other thing you can see in this is the impact of the social housing spend in Launceston. So Ravenswood and Rocherley are significant suburbs in this graph over the last 5 years. And the last thing, planning approval timeframes. There wouldn't be that many people that remember our old forums that we used to have where this was the main topic of agenda. So I'm throwing it in almost as a throwback. I think we've moved on from planning timeframes now, but as you can see, we're still about a week under our statutory timelines. So we're still performing at a level in advance of the legislation, and we're proud to do that. And I think that's part of our culture now. So we're not leaving things to the last minute because we can. We're trying to get them out as quickly as possible. So on that note, I'll hand over.
So I'd like to welcome Fintan. He's our principal planner in the strategic land use planning team, and he's going to talk you through our new housing direction. Thank you.
Thanks, Chelsea. Thanks, Richard. So obviously Richard's kind of given you a bit of a snapshot in terms of houses on the ground or lack thereof. But I guess at the end of the day, we need to look at what that does for the community, because as council, that's what we're focusing on. So what you can see here is our housing challenge based on our inability to deliver housing in Launceston. So as you can see, we continue to grow, roughly 500 new residents. It is undulating, and that is an average. We're already undersupplying the market, so we already need to get 1,500 houses on that ground. There is a shrinking household. We're not alone in that. That is a very common thing occurring in Tasmania as well as across Australia. There's a lack of land supply, as Richard mentioned. So those lots being created are slowly kind of dwindling. There's not enough zoned land. We're moving from a consolidation space into a proactive space. There's declining affordability. Now, I know there's community housing providers in here and Homes Tas. Obviously, you would be well aware of this ongoing trend for a lot of people. It's difficult for a lot of people to get into housing, afford to buy housing, and that is also creating more homelessness. So you're seeing people that were already on the low end being pushed out, losing opportunities for homes, losing all of those abilities. So I guess at the end of the day, we need to look at how do we change that narrative. And as Chelsea mentioned, we do have a new direction. We've got a new document. It is the Launceston Housing Plan. I kind of carry this everywhere. I've got one on my bedside table. Kind of sick of looking at it. But if you haven't had a chance to read it, it is a really good bit of work, even if I do say so myself. But we acted pretty quickly. As Chelsea mentioned, she spoke to our councillors back in July last year, and we now have that adopted in May this year. It outlines the next 15 years of housing for Launceston, and it's moving from that reactive to proactive. So rather than developers in the room coming to us, we're going, this is where we would like to see the housing occur. This is how we would like you to achieve it. This is the type of housing we'd like to see. So in terms of the hard numbers that we need to achieve, Richard mentioned that, we have been undulating. We're kind of sitting at 275 new dwellings per year. And that's on average. Obviously we have good years, we have bad years. So it is kind of tracking through, but that 275 is not going to get us to getting everyone a house. So what you can see there in the graph is that red line is essentially the forecasted line of what we need to achieve. So 300 new dwellings per year is what we need to get. But to get that is a lot more difficult than just aiming for the 300. So what we're doing is we're aiming for that high end, that 90% upper. So the aim now is 430 new dwellings per year over the next 15 years. Now, We have outlined how we're going to do that, but I guess it's not going to occur all at once. We're going to have years of higher growth, we're going to have years of lower growth, but on average, we want to see 430 new dwellings. And that would equate to roughly 6,450 new dwellings at the end of that 15 years. So 2040, 6,450 new dwellings to accommodate that growth that Richard mentioned earlier. So as you can see, they're the numbers that we're looking at. That 430, 6,450. Now Sam mentioned 4,300. That's in the next 10 years. That's what our corporate strategic plan is aiming for. This is looking a little bit further than that. That's the 15-year growth. So we want to change the narrative, but we want to do it in the right way, because it's not just about houses on the ground. It's also about neighbourhoods. It's about community. It's about people being able to live in homes. So our vision for that is about delivering homes for every stage of life, because I know that that is a difficulty for everyone here in Tasmania as well as Australia, while protecting what we love and enriching every suburb. So we're not just looking at the well-to-dos and things like that. We're looking at Rochalee, we're looking at Ravenswood, we're looking at people on the fringes. So in terms of achieving that, we're looking at our 4 key principles. So it's about supply, strong supply, land supply, enriching our neighbourhoods, making sure that we have communities set up, we're providing services, we've got open space for people to frequent. We want to collaborate with you, our partners, because at the end of the day, we aren't the ones delivering the homes. We're seeking your opportunity to partner with you to bring that aboard. And then also we're trying to align investment. So for a long time, we've kind of been drawn here, there, and everywhere else. But now we've got a clear process. We're identifying the areas that we want to go to. We're lining up the infrastructure, and we're making sure we're spending in the right areas and we're not wasting money. So within each of these principles, there's some objectives and then there's actions. So I'll take you through each of the principles, and then there's a bit of a timeline at the end in terms of how we're going to implement those. So principle 1, strong supply, is about zoning enough land, providing diverse housing options. So it's not just your standard dwelling on a single lot. We want to see medium density. We are the capital of the north. So we need to provide high density around the CBD, around activity centres. And we want to improve affordable housing supply. So those actions that you would see within those objectives are things like the neighbourhood plan, which Claire will talk to you about with St Leonard's. That's our first one. We're going to do multiple ones on that, and that is our framework to move forward. We're looking at key development sites. If you're from Launceston or you've been through Launceston and you drive through the city, you'll see that there's a lot of land within there that's probably not being used to its best use. So we want to identify what the barriers are to developing those sites, either for housing, for mixed use, for better uses for the community, for people to come here and grow. We have identified corridor areas, so Margaret Street, Wellington Street, obviously key sites that have been identified for a number of years, and nothing has kind of occurred in that space. Density zone review is looking at if our zoning is doing enough, and obviously that filters down from all this work that we're doing. And then one that I'm quite excited about is an affordable housing strategy. So that's looking at, if we're going to be contemporary council, we need to look at opportunities to provide affordable housing in the right places, not just on the fringes, in the city with services for everyone. Principle 2 is around vibrant, accessible neighbourhoods, economic vitality, and the balance of what we have and what we don't. So obviously Launceston is filled with heritage throughout. We don't want to lose that, but we need to grow with that. So we need to look at ways of how we do that. We need to provide more services, open spaces, because it's not just houses at the end of the day. So we're looking at things like neighbourhood plans around activity centres, so that's more infill, that's higher densities, that's pre-existing services, open space, making sure that there is enough there currently. The employment land strategy is a contemporary piece of work that we really don't have an understanding of. So we're looking at industrial land, retail, commercial. We need to understand what we're missing, what we need to provide, where we need to provide it, because we just don't have an understanding as it currently is. Building heights and massing is a piece of work that we've been working on to make sure that the city is open for business and people can build. And then the urban heritage design framework is something that we're working internally with our heritage team to make sure that we can develop with the heritage that we currently have. So collaborating with partners, as I mentioned, we need to collaborate with you as developers, as community housing providers, as the state government. We want to lead that collaborative approach. We want to have those discussions. We want to try and provide partnerships. So Chelsea mentioned virtuals earlier. We're already doing that in that space, and we need to kind of do that further. And as I mentioned, affordable housing in suitable locations. So moving it from the fringes, trying to move away from that generational decline and move it into a more open field. So there will be a Tasmanian planning scheme review that will be coming up in the next 18 years for us. So we need to look at whether or not the planning controls for us are working. We are going through the North Region Strategy Review at the moment, which looks at not only us, but the surrounding neighbourhoods, the surrounding suburbs, the surrounding LGAs. We will continue to do these housing forums. It's really great to see all of you come out. I think it's a doubling of what we had last year, so that's great. We will seek to do some partnerships with UTAS and students and try and get designs up and running. Housing Innovation Awards, I don't think we really do anything in that space at the moment. I'm not sure if we've done that previously, so it would be good to get back in there and reward people that are doing great work for our city. Look at incentive mechanisms for affordable housing, so that will fall out of the affordable housing strategy. And also partner with CHPs and the state government Homes Tas to deliver these great things. I was recently at the PIA conference this year. I saw a great development down in Chigwell. I think that was yours, Sarah. Really interesting stuff, and it shows that things can be delivered that are just more than homes. It can be really a inclusive community. So we'd like to bring that to Launceston as well. And then aligning investment, as I mentioned, we've kind of gone every which way, kind of being taken by developers to do this, providing infrastructure here, providing it there. So we want to establish a pipeline of infrastructure that is catalytic for development in Launceston. And also we need to realign internally. Obviously Chelsea mentioned there is a strong direction within council now. It hasn't been for a long time. So people are all on the same page. It's a whole of council approach to developing housing. So infrastructure funding frameworks, Claire again will speak about this with St Leonard's. It is a first for Tasmania. It's a really massive piece of work. It's not inconsistent with other states around Australia. We'll be seeking funding grants, making sure that our services are aligning with the housing that we are providing. We have an internal delivery committee that looks at our own sites and what we can do on our own sites and making sure that they're being maximised for all of their uses. And as I mentioned, prioritising catalytic infrastructure. So in terms of implementation, there's obviously a lot of actions that have fallen out of the housing plan. So within the next 5 years, there's a lot of neighbourhood plans that are going to come onto line. So we've already got St Leonard's off the ground. I'm working on Allenvale at the moment. We're working through South Prospect, and then we will start looking at those infill sites at key activity centres. The employment lands, as I mentioned, is a massive piece of work that we will be doing next financial year. Extremely important for what we do and how we will grow within those activity centres. A housing monitor dashboard. So that's a piece of work, and other councils throughout Tasmania have that, but it's keeping us accountable. It's making sure that everything is transparent. And it also shows, and it will hope to show you, our growth and how that will change over time. As Richard showed you before with some of those graphs, it is declining and we're going to change that. Within the next 10 years, we're looking at the northern suburbs, so your Rocherlea, Ravenswood, Mayfield, those types of areas, hoping to partner with Homes Tas to change the narrative there. And then we'll also look at those kind of key areas around Margaret Street, the hospital, Wellington Street, because they will be key growth areas. Affordable housing strategy, I'm very excited about that one, and I'm hoping to lead that one up. Public domain strategy, so we've got a consistent public domain for everyone. Awards, and then obviously you can see the 10 years plus there's things that are ongoing in terms of advocacy, infrastructure funding frameworks that will ongo once they're implemented, and also delivery within council sites. So as I mentioned, we have these ones up and running at the moment, or we are working through them this financial year. So Allen Vale, St Leonard's neighbourhood plans, we're working through those, as well as South Prospect. Building Heights and Massing is hopefully completed by the end of this financial year. We're looking at those key sites, so early investigations, barriers and the like. We're looking at our user-maintained roads. So there's a number of those throughout Launceston that are probably being underutilised that could provide additional housing. So we're going to investigate those. Housing Delivery Committee, dashboard, and the economics land strategy is an important piece that will occur next financial year. I hope that wasn't too boring. I think some of you were at the engagement for this, and I gave a similar presentation, but I'll hand over to Claire now to take you through St Leonard's and our neighbourhood planning.
Thanks Chelsea, thanks Vinton and Richard. So, planned neighbourhoods. So I presented at this forum about 12 months ago, and we'd just kicked off the St Leonard's and Waverley Neighbourhood Plan project. So now, a bit over 12 months later, we have a council adopted neighbourhood plan and infrastructure funding framework, which unlocks land which is well located in one of our residential growth areas. The essence of why we do this is because planned neighbourhoods for growth areas deliver better outcomes for council, for developers and the community. That's why we call it a neighbourhood plan, because the connection to the community and the place matters. We want to make it easier for developers to unlock land, get development happening, particularly the infrastructure funding framework, because the idea of shared infrastructure and shared costs for that shared infrastructure makes sense. This neighbourhood plan will create places for people that are connected, walkable and vibrant. In our housing plan, as you've heard, we need different housing typologies, and that's what we're hoping to achieve with St Leonard's and Waverley. Without the neighbourhood plan, we often get disconnection, delays and developer frustration. So the neighbourhood plan itself will see an enrichment and evolution of the St Leonard's and Waverley area over time. We're looking at 3,200 plus new homes over the 30-year time horizon. That's an injection of, say, 8,000 people into these communities. So what do we need to do for these communities? Well, we need to provide uplift to the parks and open spaces. We're going to have a new activity centre to the north of St Leonard's. We're going to have transport and infrastructure upgrades throughout, and an enhanced village centre for St Leonard's. The infrastructure funding framework is a key piece of the project. Now, as far as I know, no other councils across Tasmania have an infrastructure funding framework at the scale of this one. And it's not a new concept, as Vinton mentioned earlier. Other states across the country have infrastructure funding or development contribution schemes. But in Tasmania, we don't have the enabling legislation for that. So homes without infrastructure are often like empty promises. We need the funding framework that delivers both. So although St Leonard's and Waverley could be considered like a greenfield development area, we're not just looking at urban sprawl here. It's connected, it's accessible, and it's more than just detached houses. Because we need to provide diverse homes for people at every stage of life. We'll introduce inner residential zoning around the activity centres to achieve this. Broadly, the approach for the IFF looks at the context, identifies the infrastructure needs, determines the delivery approach, and the administration and implementation requirements. So the neighbourhood plan and the IFF will bridge the gap between vision to delivery. It's about alignment of infrastructure and development staging. This is a proactive approach rather than being reactive. We clarify the funding responsibilities. Who pays for what? What's council paying for? What's the state government paying for? What's developers and federal government paying for? It also enables coordinated infrastructure networks. things like transport, drainage, open space and community needs. The IFF really just seeks to provide confidence to the market that infrastructure will be coordinated and the costs understood at the outset. That way developments can be financially viable and get started quicker. So some of the benefits of the IFF, this is really about coordinated delivery, as I said. So the benefits for council is we get budget predictability, delivery coordination, better community outcomes. For developers, you get certainty around contributions, timely access to infrastructure, shared costs for shared infrastructure, more attractive market-ready communities. And for the community, we get connected places, walking, riding, transport, planned open space areas, and diversity of housing types. So this slide's about selling the dream. So we've engaged a consultant to help us sell the dream, basically. The plan's been adopted by council, but it won't just be sitting on a shelf. What this will do is set up a brand identity for St Leonards and Waverley. And these snapshots are sort of a bit of a sneak peek of what the website will look like, but it'll launch in the coming weeks. We'll embed an online map on there with additional functionality so that current and future residents can locate amenities, internal and external, to the site. We'll also include details of upcoming projects that council are delivering. And we'll be able to connect with individual developer websites as necessary. So holistically, an overview of where we're at from a neighbourhood planning perspective. St Leonards and Waverley neighbourhood plan's been adopted, and we'll progress with the planning scheme amendments to implement that now. Allenvale neighbourhood plan is underway. We're aiming to finalise by mid next year. South Prospect draft project plan's been prepared and conversations are ongoing. On the horizon, we've got future neighbourhood plans, as Finn mentioned, in our northern suburbs, Rochely and Ravenswood, Kings Meadows, Mowbray and Lilydale. Thank you.